The 220th Battalion was an infantry battalion of the Australian Army, raised in mid-1940 as part of the 8th Division. The battalion was recruited from Second Australian Imperial Force volunteers drawn from the state of New South Wales. In early 1941, the 220th Battalion deployed to Malaya, where they formed part of the garrison there until December when the Japanese invaded. The battalion subsequently fought a brief campaign along the east coast of the Malay Peninsula before being withdrawn back to Singapore in early 1942. They were heavily engaged after the Japanese landed on the island, and were eventually captured following the fall of Singapore. Most members of the battalion became prisoners of war, and a large number died in captivity. History: raised for service during Second World War as part of the Second Australian Imperial Force. The 220th Battalion was formed on 15 July 1940 at Walgrove in Sydney under the command of Lieutenant Colonel William Jeter and was attached to the 22nd Brigade, 8th Division, with an authorized strength of between 800 and 900 men. The battalion was organized into a headquarters and 4 rifle companies, designated A-D. The battalion's recruits were mainly drawn from Sydney, Newcastle and the New South Wales North Coast. The colours chosen for the battalion's unit colour patch were the same as those of the 20th Battalion, a unit which had served during World War I before being raised as a militia formation in 1921. These colors were white over green, in a diamond shape, although a border of grey in an oval shape was added to the UCP to distinguish the battalion from its militia counterpart. The oval shape designated the battalion as part of the 8th Division. In late 1940, the British asked the Australian government to contribute a force to garrison the strategically important port of Singapore as tensions in the Pacific with the Japanese rose. Although they had not completed the training, the 22nd Brigade was eventually allocated to this task in early 1941, under the proviso that they would be relieved after a short period and return to Australia to complete their training prior to being sent to the Middle East, embarking for Singapore on the 2nd of February 1941. The battalion subsequently took up positions in southwest Malaya where it conducted further training around Port Dickson. In early August, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ashton took over as commanding officer, and the battalion was redeployed to Mersing, constructing defences there. Following the landings on 8 December 1941, the battalion was subsequently involved in fighting against the Japanese as part of the Malayan campaign. The first strikes of the Japanese attack fell on British and Indian troops in the north of the country, and initially the Australian units, which were based primarily in the south around Johor, did not see much fighting. On the 7th of January 1942, C Company was detached to form part of a special unit to delay the Japanese advance at Ndai on the north coast, clashing with the Japanese on a number of occasions before withdrawing to the battalion main defensive position at Mersing on the 26th of January. Meanwhile, the remainder of the battalion at Mersing also clashed with the Japanese on a number of occasions, and was heavily bombed. After being rejoined by C Company, the 220th Battalion withdrew to Singapore Island on the 31st of January, where it took up positions on the northern flank of the brigade sector, situated on the northwest coast of the island. The 22nd Brigade was allocated a frontage of 8 miles, considerably larger than normal, along a stretch of coastline that was hard to defend due to its terrain. When the Japanese assaulted the island on 8 February 1942, the main assault fell on the 22nd Brigade's area. Stretched across a wide frontage, the two 20th Battalion's lines were eventually infiltrated by the assaulting Japanese. After initially inflicting heavy casualties on the Japanese, the battalion, threatened with encirclement, was forced to withdraw to a new position along Limchu Road. Although still intact, it was apparent that this position would shortly be overwhelmed, and the battalion was again ordered to move south, during which it became scattered. The initial Japanese assault cost the battalion heavily. Casualties on the first night amounted to 334 killed and 214 wounded, including the commanding officer, second in command, and 3 of the 4 company commanders. After Ashton had been wounded in the initial Japanese assault, a section was sent out to pull him to safety, but before they reached him, he ordered them to leave him due to the volume of Japanese fire, and he was subsequently killed. Separated, the individual elements of the battalion continued to conduct a fighting withdrawal, but were subsequently captured on the outskirts of Singapore City on the night of 15 February 1942, along with the bulk of the British Commonwealth forces on the island after the garrison commander, Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, ordered surrender. The men were initially imprisoned at Changi. However, many were later sent to work on Thai-Burma Railway, while others were sent to prison camps in Borneo, Japan, French Indochina, Java, Sumatra, and Malaya, where they endured considerable hardship, with many men dying in captivity. Following the surrender of Japan, the survivors were liberated in August 1945. The battalion was disbanded later in 1945, having lost 561 men dead, and 122 wounded. Members of the battalion received the following decorations: 1 military medal, 1 distinguished conduct medal, and 9 mentions in dispatches. Battle Honours. The 20th Battalion was awarded the following battle honours: Malaya 1941, 1942, Johor, Singapore Island. Commanding officers. The following officers commanded the 20th Battalion during the war: Lieutenant Colonel William G. Tutt and Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ashton.